Welcome everybody to the Hirewell Recruiting Insights podcast. I'm your host, James Hornick, partner at Hirewell. A special day for the podcast. First time ever we're doing 3 people remotely without my computer melting down, though I shouldn't say that too soon because anything can happen here still. So joining me, 2 of my colleagues, Jeff Smith, who is a partner who runs our managed recruiting practice, and Ryan Brown, lead recruiter in our HR recruiting practice. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having us.
I had to add the gong, and I also have to point out that listening to Ryan say exactly what you said 15 seconds prior on the actual live podcast was as meta as it gets.
So yeah, I always have to make sure that it's 15, 20 seconds or so as a delay. And so if anybody has any questions, I'll just hit the gong here on the thing. If anybody has any questions, the focus of today's podcast and what we want to kind of talk about is there's a lot of people out there who probably weren't planning on doing a job search that suddenly have to. And because of that, might have some issues, and we wanted to make sure. I think when you're when you're thrust into a position of having to do a job search without any warning, it can be really off-putting. Ideally, if people are looking for a new position, they're doing it when there's actually they've made a plan. They plan on making a career change. There's things they want to do, but that's not the situation, the reality of it most people are in right now. And there's a level of panic that kicks in. And I think what we wanted to do and what we've been doing as a business for the last 3 or 4 weeks or so is really kind of shifting our focus to how we can just help others, and really kind of conveying our knowledge of kind of the job search process, the resume process, LinkedIn, everything else to best benefit everybody who's in need right now. So we've been having a lot of conversations, not just the 3 of us here, but a lot of people at Hirewell, and kind of combining our shared knowledge base of everything we've been working on. And we're working on putting together. We're doing a free service offering to help anybody who's kind of in need of a job search right now, but also putting a lot of content out there in terms of the things that people could do differently and do better. I don't know, you guys, I have a lot of different conversations with different people who are top notch, great at what they do. But when you're not a no one's a professional job seeker, and we end up seeing a lot of the same, I don't want to say mistakes, but a lot of the same challenges people have over and over again. So it's kind of like categorizing those. That way we can kind of just help everyone out. So I guess I'll start with you guys. What's if we're gonna first, if you were laid off, Jeff or Ryan, today, or someone else is in that position, where would you start? Kind of what things would you look at, and what do you think is kind of important to kind of level set with yourself to get that process started?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think you have to give yourself a little bit of time to process stuff. I think especially in these types of positions where you're not really anticipating, hey, I'm going to start looking for a job, and like you mentioned, just thrust into this new job search or new environment, it can be really challenging to focus on that mentally and kind of prepare yourself, even emotionally, especially during times like this. This is a really challenging time mentally and emotionally for a ton of people. So I think you have to give yourself a couple days, a week to really process everything that's going on before you can get into the details of your search and starting to put some process around what that looks like. I think making sure that you're in the right headspace to take this on is equally as important as making sure that your resume and your LinkedIn and all of those things are put together as well.
Absolutely. Jeff, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the thing that you mentioned before, it's not mistakes. James, you made a good point. It's not mistakes, it's challenges. I think a lot of people, for whatever reason, ruminate about why me, what happened, what did I do wrong? And there's nothing you did wrong. A virus hit the world, and you got thrust into a predicament that you didn't foresee. And Ryan, taking a second is absolutely crucial. Everybody, I think, has that visceral reaction to springboard into go, apply for jobs, get your resume out there. And that's probably, and I think we're going to cover that more granularly here, it's probably maybe the worst thing that you can do, not setting up kind of an organized kind of approach as to how you're going to attack your job search.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that it's very rare. I've talked to a lot of people who they really have their shit together. You know what I mean? These are people who are great at their career and they're just cruising along at a good clip, just executing or doing whatever they do. and they're kind of in that position all of a sudden where, they're kind of a fish out of water, when you're just not anticipating something like this, because you've got all the other kind of concerns everyone has to deal with in terms of family and financial and whatnot. So making sure you're in that kind of headspace, I think, as Ryan said, is important. The second thing I would do after that is just tell everyone, don't be embarrassed. I think you have to, and before you even start your full search, before you start really putting yourself out there, because it might take you a little bit of time to kind of nail down all the particulars, which we'll talk about too. But telling your inner circle, your family, your friends, and the professional colleagues, the people they're going to go to bat for you no matter what, just let them be aware of what happened, that you're out there, you're looking. I think some people, there's a natural, some people are a little embarrassed. Some people don't want to inform anyone until they have their complete plan kind of put in place. But I think in terms of like your closest inner circle, I think it will help you kind of get your head right in terms of some level setting. You might have other people out there doing the same thing. You're going to have a lot of people have different ideas of how they can help. You might know people, especially in your professional network, that actually need to hire, that might have openings right now, or can give you more direction in terms of what else is happening in the market, what they've seen, or what colleagues they have that could, need people. So I think the sooner you can do that, the better. I think it feels good to, it's kind of therapeutic, just talking with people and letting them know, because especially in a situation like this, I've never seen a time where perfect strangers are as empathetic as they are right now. Like I've with everyone I've talked to, like it seems like we're in an industry where, as recruiters, a lot of times we're reaching out to people, they just want to be bothered, right? Like they just I can never recall a time in my career where people are as welcoming and understanding and willing to help and go to bat for other people as right now. So I would say if something has happened to you, just start talking about it, especially with the people who are closest. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, James. And I think that like the perspective that you can get from the people in your inner circle, from your friends, from your family, from the people in your professional network that you really trust, that's extremely important, especially in a time like now. You never know who's connected to someone, like you mentioned, that may be hiring, or just able to get you into contact with folks that are going to be really crucial to helping your search at this time. And the therapeutic aspect of it as well. I think so many people are leading with empathy right now, which is so important, leading with kindness and just being a good person in a time like this. It's really invaluable.
I think, and I think all three of us have kind of talked about this offline when we talked, especially folks who like haven't done a job search in a while. We take for granted what the recruiting 101 or the job seeking 101 stuff is. And I catch myself thinking, gosh, am I just like talking down, just like this stuff seems so natural to me to talk about. But as I've talked to, very skilled people all the way up to, executive and senior leadership type candidates who are now looking for jobs, just the pointers on resumes, the list of questions that you should prepare to ask, like the list of questions you shouldn't ask, like all of that stuff that seems second nature to us three and everybody in our kind of vertical. It's kind of, it was a jar to my system how much like the general marketplace hasn't thought about that stuff in a long time.
Mm-hmm. I think job search, that's the thing, is we have an advantage because, like you said, this is so commonplace to us that we take for granted like how much we know about the area, which is why I'm glad we're able to do what we're doing in terms of helping others. But I guess one of the key things I would say too is like, if you wanted to become an expert job searcher, like none of this stuff is like, it's not that difficult. It's just taking some time to, there's a lot of resources out there, some of which we'll be providing, but there's other places you can go as well too. And making sure you can kind of get a plan and everything set up, and just know that things are going to work out in one way or another. You're not the first person right now. There's literally millions of people kind of in the same predicament right now. So anyway, along those lines too, I'm trying to think like what else, even before you get into the job search. Like I think one thing that's important too is really have a good manage on your finances. I think that you have to, when times are good, it's easy to not have to worry about, some people are living paycheck to paycheck all the time. Some people aren't. But knowing exactly kind of where you stand with finances, getting a grip just not only on your spending, but kind of what you have budgeted, and making sure you have just a good handle of what your runway is. You know what I mean? Like how much time you have to find something. Do you have any other support mechanisms or levers you can pull? Do you need to start looking at some freelancing or a side gig or something like that? Depending on your skill set, there might be some stuff you can do kind of here and there. But having a plan in place for that and just knowing kind of exactly where you stand will give you the peace of mind too. Because I think that's part of the. I mean, I would say the biggest part of why anybody would panic when they're laid off and need to start looking for a job is they just, you think that in your own mind with your finances, like the world is ending. You have your bills and stuff are piling up. But even if you just know exactly how much, kind of leeway you have, can really take some of the pressure off, or, it may also apply pressure, but then at least kind of where things stand. So.
Yeah. And I think to caveat off of that a little bit, I think where a ton of people end up getting a lot of anxiety in these types of positions is the unknown, right? Like the unknown of how long my money is going to last, how long my job search is going to take, like what people can or can't help me, and putting these things in place and spending some time before you even start searching and getting this plan in place before the job search actually begins can take off a lot of that pressure, or at least give you some insight into like the areas that maybe you need to take a deeper glance at too.
Yeah. Let's get maybe deeper into it. So like it's time to start the actual search, right? Jeff. Okay. When it's time you've gotten past like some of this kind of stuff you're doing on kind of internally, where do you start at this point when it's time to actually start like hitting it hard?
Two inventories, a network inventory and a list of open positions inventory. And when I say a list of open positions, I don't mean go to, a job board and blanket apply to like every single job. I think you want to Ryan's point, you want to be thoughtful about what is the next role that you want. Like think about everything that you've just experienced in your 3, 5, 7, 10, 15-year career at XYZ company and say, gosh, I really liked managing these people. Gosh, I really hated managing people. I love the individual contributor aspects of some things, some not so much. Really think about that stuff so that when you do take the dive into the next job, that it fits better for what you actually want, what fulfills you, right? Mm-hmm. Number one. I think, you're going to want to really think about like the target list of companies. You're going to want to think about the types of companies that, we've all been, looking around and know what's kind of going on in the marketplace. So as a candidate, you know who your competitors are, where you fit well, start to get on their job boards and see like what aligns, what doesn't align. And then secondly, get into and dig into those networks that you've already cultivated within those organizations. If you haven't cultivated them, start to cultivate them. Use recruiters like us. We definitely have relationships in lots of different organizations. So part and parcel to what we're doing with the candidate marketing program over the next 30 days is part of my discussion is send me opportunities that you're interested in. Maybe I know somebody I can do you a solid. But then on your own, you've got to start reaching out and branding yourself. Who are you? What is your personal brand and what do you bring to the table for these organizations that are still hiring when the competition is going to increase tenfold? I think that those are really important first steps to take in starting that narrative.
Yeah, you have to know your story, right? Like, who are you? What are you bringing to the table? What is the next best role going to be like? And how do you separate yourself as a top candidate or the best candidate for a role? You have to really spend time like thinking about that and developing your narrative that's very authentic to who you are, to your skill set. And I think to Jeff's point about networking, that's an awesome opportunity for you to practice that story too. Like you want to make sure that when you're connecting with someone and sharing your background, like you have a really solid story that you're able to share with them that highlights, what you bring to the table and who you are as a person and an employee. And I think that's equally as important as putting together the list of roles that might be appealing to you or the companies that you want to target.
I think as a complete aside, and James, you and I talked about this, there's an art to this. So I don't think any of us are saying carte blanche, like just start like blasting people on LinkedIn, because that's also the wrong approach. But I've actually had a lot of people ask me like, am I being insensitive? Am I being pushy if I like try to connect with an HR director, or if I try to connect with an individual who I think might be in the sphere of influence of the job that's posted, right? I'm a product manager. I go to the VP of product and I find them in that company. There's nothing wrong with creating, to your point, Ryan, an authentic message to that individual and expressing your interest and how it relates to you. What you don't want to do is send 15 blanket messages across the organization, because then the opposite effect happens. You do get labeled as a pest internally, because all of those internal individuals and employees are going to be like, who is this person?
Right.
Yeah, and I think this is the conversation I've been having with a lot of people too. It's kind of on the same topic here. Is as you're talking about contacting people within companies, I can't impress this upon people enough, in that the approach of just applying to jobs online is not an effective way of job searching, especially now. And that's not to say that it's a waste of time, because you should absolutely do it, because people get hired from jobs all the time. But I think people underestimate the amount of resumes that get submitted to jobs online. Like, we see that every day. If it's a hot skill set or something that's, it's a good looking job, there's gonna be hundreds of people to apply to it potentially. And even if you're one of the best people for that job, just the sheer volume of paper that people have to sift through, it makes it really hard you just can't rely on that being the mechanism that's going to get you in play anywhere. Just, by the numbers, you're just a, 1%, 2%, 5% chance. And because there's a lot of things you can do to kind of better your odds there in terms of like how to make your resume stand out. But just the approach of, one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is by the time something is posted, take it from like inception. If you're going to create a new position at a company, you're at a company, you're creating a new position, you have an idea that you need something. The best time to get in the door at a company is in that phase, before they've created a job description, before they've actually posted anywhere. Because if you're a hiring manager, the last thing you feel like doing is having a prolonged interview process. You don't feel like talking to lots of people. You don't feel like spending all this time on stuff. In the back of your mind, you really wish, I just wish I knew somebody who could do this. Now, how do you do that, right? Like, how do you get in line for jobs before they're actually posted or created? It's you can't predict it per se, but that's why it's important to network. That's why it's important to constantly be start not by jobs you see posted, but do that on the side, but figure out what companies you actually want to work for, what places you find generally interesting, what places you think could use your skill set. And that's why it's important to always be kind of, seeking out the knowledge and advice of people at those organizations, having conversations with them, making sure you're on their radar. There's a lot of, kind of different techniques you could kind of use for this. But the people that I know who have the most success finding interesting positions in their job search, it goes beyond just applying for things, and it goes, taking that message that you've kind of created. And part of your plan has to be doing some sort of like proactive network-based approach, where it's a daily effort of meeting new people, because eventually, some of these companies you're reaching out to are going to have openings, are going to have needs. And when you're already in the back of their mind, they're already starting to subconsciously create that position around you, which is the ideal position to be in. So,
right. That's a great point, James. And having been on the other side and run my own internal program, I don't want to be blunt, but I also think it's important to be super transparent, especially at times like this. What James said is absolutely true. And I also, a caveat, there are companies that we interact with all the time that have internal recruiting down to a T and are very impressive programs. So I don't want this to be a blanket statement, but there are organizations out there where recruiting is lean. At times like this, the first place that unfortunately, layoffs and cost cutting happens is in human resources and recruiting. And that increases the strain on the influx of those resumes tenfold. And it's a numbers game. You could cultivate your resume to be the exact match for a job, and it may never be seen. And I think it's really important that people understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I advise people, I think there's two aspects to it. So one, you should be doing it based upon companies you're interested in all the time. Like the thing I always tell people is ask for advice, because anybody who's been at a company where someone comes to them and say, hey, are you guys hiring, when they're not hiring, they're usually like, no, contact HR. I don't feel like dealing with it. But you ask somebody for advice related to your job search. You know what I mean? I'm looking to make a career change. I'm looking to break into a brand new area. I can see you're really good at what you do. Like, you have a few minutes to chat sometime. I'd love to pick your brain. People absolutely get back to you tenfold higher on that kind of message, just when it's more casual and not about a job search, which can turn into a backdoor interview, or can turn into kind of warm connections. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is too, when you do apply to places, you should absolutely try to figure out who the hiring managers are, introduce yourself to the recruiters, the HR people, be proactive. I get that question a lot. People think it's like a little bit pushy, you know what I mean? Or they're afraid that like, okay, I applied. Should I follow up with anyone else? I'm just like, sure. Like, you have nothing to lose, And any company that's going to be turned off, assuming you have like a tasteful way of approaching them,
Right.
You know what I mean? Anybody who's turned off that you're interested in their company, like, is that a place you like, is that a place you want to work for anyway? So.
Yep, I've said that 2 or 3 times in my marketing sessions. There's been very pointed questions about XYZ company, and I kind of got like slapped on the wrist, and my response is, tell them to pound sand. It's true.
Or snow today, I guess.
Or snow. I mean, seriously, if that's going to be your brand in the worst of times, you've gotten some great insight into how things probably function internally, and culturally speaking, if that's the type of place that you're looking for, great, go for it. But there's probably better options out there.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I kind of want to move into the resume stuff, because I know we kind of put some thought into this, and talking about resumes is painful. No one likes writing resumes. No one really likes reading resumes. No one likes writing blog posts or creating content based on resumes, just because it's just like the most dry.
But here we are.
Yeah, here we are
talking about it.
So
I wish we had video of all of our sessions, James, where we've just like complained about dealing with resumes in general.
So unfortunately, it's a necessary evil. And like, I think that the first thing I would say, I guess the one thing I always want to convey, and this is why I go back and forth on resume writing services, right? I'm not saying they're all worthless. I'm not saying they don't have value. Some of them are good. A lot of them are, a lot of them aren't that good though. And I think there's one thing that you need to kind of keep in mind is that so much on your resume is really depends on your domain knowledge. Meaning, if you were to get someone who's just a good writer to help you out with your resume, and they don't actually understand what you do, or they don't have any background in your field. So like Ryan, the people you talk to every day on a daily basis, someone who's, a head of talent acquisition or a head of learning and development or something like that, and they were to get help from a writer who had no background in any of those areas, it's not going to translate well.
No, not at all.
I'm sure the verbiage will be great. Their word use will be great. But in terms of actually trying to articulate what their value is, it would be really hard for them to do. And I guarantee it would be a less than optimal kind of portrayal of their background. So
absolutely.
I always think that one thing you need to do is, that's why I've always been a big proponent of people taking ownership of their own resume writing. I know writing's not always fun. I know it's sometimes hard to write about yourself, but the one thing you could do, even if you decide to go that route, is you need to make sure you're getting actual feedback from people in your field. Someone who has the same background as you, who has hired people like you, and just ask them, hey, I'm struggling with my resume. I'm not sure how to best articulate this experience. You've hired for people like this in the past, or you've worked in this type of role in the past. What am I missing? Like, what sorts of things should I be kind of including on here? What do people want to see? Side note, that's also a great way to get yourself a backdoor interview somewhere. Like asking someone who's in your field, hey, I'm not looking for a job. What I'm looking for is I'm struggling to write this resume, because I just don't know what people are looking for. Would you mind giving me some feedback in terms of what I should be kind of including in here? And if you can ask that to someone in your field who's also, side note, potentially hiring manager, I think they're more willing to get back to you on that type of message, and also think the feedback they will give you is completely invaluable.
I totally agree. I actually recently spoke with someone about their resume. We were going through some things, and I think what's difficult about giving resume advice all of the time as well is like they're kind of subjective in a way too. Like what one person might think is super important for a resume or like formatting or something else, another person might not totally agree. So to your point, James, of like you have to take ownership of your resume. You do. Someone else can't articulate your experience in the same way you can, but I think to that point, talking to experts in the space because they know what's important to highlight. They can help you develop or edit specific parts, but really like this information has to come from you. No one knows your background better than you do. So taking ownership of it and being an active participant in those editing sessions is really important.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience, Ryan, and you nailed it. Like, you have no idea who's going to read this resume. Lots of companies with really, really robust talent acquisition programs have very specialized recruiters that only recruit on specific jobs. And in those scenarios, just like with agencies, you can be relatively confident that the person that you're talking to probably has a little bit more domain expertise, right? But again, the candidates you guys are still the ones, and by you guys, I'm talking to the audience and, the people that do the jobs, that you're the ones that know what you do day to day. So you're the only one that can really construct that narrative appropriately. But again, some companies don't have really well thought out talent acquisition programs at all. And you're talking to a generalist recruiter or sending a resume to a generalist recruiter who's reviewing finance resumes and technology resumes and marketing resumes. I mean, it really is a coin flip. So to James's point, yes, you can drop a lot of money into a well-constructed and well-articulated resume, but if it falls into the wrong hands, it doesn't really matter.
And that's like another point too, is that like, if you're applying to 10 different jobs, you're going to need 10 different versions of your resume. Like every single resume you sent out, especially now in this market, has to be tailored. You might have, if you have a broad, like most people are capable of doing a lot, and you probably have done a lot of different things in your job. And if this is your responsibilities, this wide range of things you've done, and the job description calls for maybe just these few things, you need to make sure that you're focused on those few things the most. Like, there's no law written that if you've done a variety of different tasks that you have to give them an equal amount of time on your resume, because when you're trying to get through the resume filter, meaning the person who's reading them and trying to understand, okay, who are the 10 people I'm going to actually reach out to or we actually want to consider for this, the less focused you are towards the deliverables of this position, the assumption that they're going to make is that, okay, you're not as deep in these areas, so you're not as good as a candidate as the person who did focus just in those areas. So for that reason alone, I think that it's effort, obviously, but like it's necessary effort. Like, you need to make sure that, but that's the one thing that's beautiful about job descriptions. Like, everyone hates reading resumes. Everyone really hates reading job descriptions. But companies that do a good job of putting them together, they tell you exactly what they're looking for. Like, they tell you exactly the types of things that they desire. And if you go above and beyond everyone else that you're kind of competing against and making sure that, okay, these are the things we're going to talk about the most. And that's not to say you shouldn't, I want to make sure I'm being very clear. You shouldn't misrepresent your background. You shouldn't make stuff up. But anything that's in the job description that seems to be important that you have done, you need to make sure you spend way more time kind of discussing those aspects of your background than everything else you've done, because that definitely will give you a leg up in those situations where you're trying to compete against that vast sea of candidates who are competing for the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the end of this topic yet, but people talk about like how many pages, like, newsflash, references are always available upon request, not necessary to be on a resume. Like, objective statement, tailor it. Don't make it some generic, highly motivated like, we get it. And that's fine. I'm a highly motivated professional person, but that doesn't make me a principal engineer for, Google. You have to be thoughtful about your narrative. And I think people who aren't, it's funny, I'm Gen X and straddle this line between social media and liking it and not liking it, but people who have gotten good with social media know how to brand themselves. And as we increasingly go into a completely digital space about who you are and what you do, that's going to become 10 times more important. And those people who have cultivated those skills using those specific tools, you can tell have a leg up from like the more traditional method of marketing yourself.
Totally. And I think the people that struggle with, like James mentioned, having a broader background and having a broader skill set, they tend to have a harder time, I think, constructing their resume because they feel like they have all of these really great skill sets that they want to highlight. But it is so vital and important to have multiple copies of your resume that are tailored to more specific roles for this instance alone, right? Like you have to set yourself apart. And you have to be able to brand yourself correctly in order to be a part of that top candidate pool.
Only other thing I'd say on resumes in terms of topic is this is kind of the joke within the marketing recruiting team, because I overuse this phrase all the time, because this is ultimately what everybody wants in every marketer ever. Everybody wants a data-driven storyteller. You can make that. It doesn't matter if it's a content position, an analytics position, or if it's SEO, or if it's UX, or anything in marketing. They want someone who understands data and someone who can write. That's so it's every
newsflash, James. It's every job description
it's
now.
So it's just like I always say. So everyone wants a data-driven storyteller. So what that really means, kind of breaking it down for resumes, is you have to be able to use some sort of, anytime you can have a quantitative metric that you can discuss, deliverables you did, whether it's like if you're in sales, whether it's quota numbers and how you did, but like pretty much every skill set at this point has some sort of metric you can talk about. But also if you can tie it into just describing kind of what the project was and what the successes were and those types of things, as opposed to just saying this was my skill set and the things I did, but actually talking about it from the context of here were kind of some details of how we went about it, why we went about it, those types of things, because that's more memorable. So when somebody remembers that you described some project you worked on, how you knocked it out of the park, sounds more impressive than this guy did SEO. You know what I mean? So those are, I guess, if there's anything that you need to kind of think about, it's in relation and how you want to kind of construct things. It's that. What projects and what stories can you tell about and successes you've had? And are there any metrics at all you can kind of tie into it that are going to really pop? So
our humanity is the differentiator now, is kind of the bottom line. Like you said, an SEO specialist is going to be pulling the same levers, the same buttons. Like there's a lot of those individuals. It's how you convey that to your audience in as broad a spectrum as possible that's going to make the difference.
I'm running out of content here, guys. Anything else you wanted to talk about in today's session?
I think one of the major things that I really want people to take away from this and from everything that's going on is, like, first and foremost, before anything else starts, you have to take care of yourself. You can't be or present the best version of yourself on your resume, in interviews, or networking if that part isn't taken care of. And because these are such unprecedented times that no one has ever experienced this before, and it's very difficult to process that because there aren't a ton of tools for people to lean on in these types of situations. Make sure that you're taking the time for yourself and that you're getting into a really good headspace before any of this is starting, because it's not going to come across as your true self if you're not okay with everything that's going on and where you're at. So I think before anything else starts, whether it's a new project at work or you're starting a new job search, taking that time, I think, is really, really vital for this specific position that everyone's in.
I think that's paramount, Ryan. I think to the second part of this is a lot of people, and we as recruiters never get to say this again as bluntly as I can right now. So people always say, I want transparent, I want full, I want, totally constructive, unbiased feedback. You have to be willing to take the good and the bad. And if you're really truly asking us what our advice is, what we think of you, and you being your whole story, you have to open yourself up to criticism, and you have to open yourself up to letting somebody help you grow. If you don't do that and you keep your walls up, you will continue to run into the same roadblock. So when you come in to ask for help, and a lot of people need the help, I need the help. Like, everybody has their freak out moments, right? I'm surrounding myself with that same structure to keep myself sane. If you're not listening to those people that are trying to advocate for you, it's all for naught. So when you say that you want the transparent feedback, be willing and open to accepting it.
Agree 100%. And I think that's always, I'm hoping people will be more open to that now, especially the situation we're in. But I know over the years, it's for some people, it's always hard to take. But I think at this point, like, you don't have any other option. So I'm trying to think. I guess we'll do this again in a week, 2 weeks, something like that. So do another podcast, and there's a lot of things. I know we want to get deeper into interviewing. I know we want to get deeper into negotiating and stuff like that. Like, I can't wait to have a long, detailed podcast about how to use LinkedIn properly. It's really going to hit my wheelhouse. But
one could say properly, or just to use LinkedIn in James Hornick's vacuum. But
just post, baby. Yeah. Anyways, well, cool, guys. It's great to catch up with you again, Ryan. I love the fireplace in the background there.
Thank
you really put Jeff and I to shame. Any last thoughts?
That's what I'm here for. It was a great session, guys. Thanks so much. And I hope everyone takes something from this. Feel free to reach out to us if we're not the best person for you to get in contact with. We're more than happy to make introductions specifically to people within Hirewell and even our network. Like, now is the time to be kind and to be helpful. And so if we can be a part of that, we're happy to.
Awesome. Let me wrap it up. Let's see if I can do this without botching it. Thanks for listening to Hirewell's Recruiting Insights podcast. If you like what you heard and want more insights from our recruiting experts, visit hirewell.com/recruiting-insights. And remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, or YouTube. See you soon.